It's July 20, Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum resumes its work today. My name is Svetlana Chaparenko. Now we will have the presentation of the study on the impact of Russian aggression on the environment of Ukraine. Our speakers today are Oleksandr Krasnolutskyi, First Deputy Minister of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine, Stanislav Shum, Chief Executive Officer at Top Lead, Natalia Slobodian, Head of the Climate Change and Environmental Protection Department of DTEK, and Mykhailo Rizak, Director for Government Relations and Sustainable Development at NIBULON. We all know that Russian Federation commits multiple crimes in Ukraine. Ecocide is one of such crimes. It's been recognized by the civilized world. And now the first question will be to Mr. Oleksandr. Is there any preliminary calculations of the losses inflicted by Russian Federation on our environment, and what does the Ministry of Environmental Protection do in this regard? Thank you very much. Good afternoon, dear participants, dear spectators, dear journalists. Really, the war of Russia on Ukraine produces a significant impact on the Ukrainian environment. Since the moment of the beginning of the invasion, the State Ecological Inspection calculates the losses inflicted upon the environment, and now this figure reaches more than 2 trillion hryvnias for more than 2,000 cases of such loss and damage to the air, water, forests, biodiversity, natural reserves, wildlife sanctuaries, and conservation areas, even risking their lives. The representatives of the State Ecological Inspection continue calculating the losses. All of them are documented. It's mandatory to make sure that the aggressor can be brought liable for that loss produced on our or inflicted on our environment. According to the formula of peace proposed by President Zelensky, compensation of losses for ecocide is one of the components of the peace formula. This is why it's a very important element, and I want to say that on the June 30 this year, a working team was created in the President's office, which covers 3 areas. First is ecocide, the calculation of losses inflicted by the ecocide, the calculation of the current damage and losses, and implementation of the international mechanism to bring the aggressor to liability for the damage inflicted upon our environment. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Oleksandr. I would like to ask Mr. Stanislav, let's check out the study. Can you please give us more details about this study? Who supported the study, and what are the fundamental conclusions drawn from the study? Well, this research is the attempt to demonstrate the impact produced by the war on the environment of Ukraine, to demonstrate it to the world. 90% of the information is the impact on the environment of Ukraine, and our task was to collect all the information by the ministry and other organizations to make this data systematized, categorized, and reproduce it as the infographics for the most convenient and user-friendly perception, so this information can be delivered to the broader community, including the global community, the Western community. I want to thank DTEK, NIBULON, Adama Ukraine, and other companies of Ukraine who supported this research. The representatives of DTEK and NIBULON can tell you about this impact on the environment produced by the aggressor, not only on the environment but also on the businesses of those companies. They are big companies which are either involved in supply of the food products or electric power. And to give you several numbers for the media, for example, the territory which is mined in Ukraine equals to the territory of 2 Austrias. This is something that should be communicated to European politicians, to those who help us, to those who support us. However, those decisions are being taken a little bit longer than we would like to expect. So two Austrias are already mined, and it influences the operation of the businesses in Ukraine and so on and so forth. The residues of the Russian material, I'll give you a focus on a couple of important things. For example, the residues of the Russian material that was damaged by our defenders. So 527,000 tons of metal. It's like 10 Titanics scattered around Ukraine. So this is the equivalent of the metal which is scattered around the fields of Ukraine. It continues producing emissions. All that military material is burned, it's damaged, and those emissions continue to seep in the air. So the task of ours was to produce this information, to reproduce this information, to communicate it to the media, to communicate it to the media of the West. And I want to thank our information partners, the Institute of Water Reserves and Polish editorial Gazeta Wyborcza, who spread this information abroad. They will be responsible for dissemination of the English versions. So this research is made into versions in Ukrainian and English. It can be downloaded by the link under this video and scanning this QR code on the screen. So those are the key things I wanted to communicate. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stanislav. Ms. Natalia, we all understand that the damage of the environment is damage to the businesses working in those areas. So the businesses by DTEK were affected as well. Can you please tell us how does the ecocide influence the operation of your business, of your company, and what does the company do to overcome the consequences of all of these? Thank you for the invitation. I want to thank our colleagues for this fundamental research. It's really necessary now. From the very first moment, I would like to stress that the energy sector of Ukraine is in war starting from 2014. So since the beginning of the full-scale invasion on the 24th of February 2022, certain solutions were already worked out in the territories where the battles were active before, that were temporarily occupied before the 24th of February. But Ukrainian energy sector for the first time has faced such challenges as nuclear blackmailing, the attacks on our energy infrastructure, both generating and energy transporting. It's not a secret that the energy sector became the target of Russian attacks. Russians launched 5,000 missiles targeted against Ukraine, at least half of which were targeting the Ukrainian power infrastructure facilities. So what the war taught us, that the green power is not about the sustainable development and environmental protection. It's not about compliance with the modern trends and the alliance with the European green agenda. For us, for Ukrainians, it's fundamental for the sustainable and uninterrupted power supply, because one rocket may damage or destroy 200, 400 megawatts of thermal generation, but it's impossible in case of wind energy, where one turbine produces 4 to 6 megawatts of energy. And during the shutdowns, green energy allowed us not to reduce the electric power supply to the inhabitants of the southern Ukraine. There are three key factors for this: our energy security, then it's about our energy sustainability and uninterrupted power supply, And third, not least important, is the opportunity for business development for exports of the clean energy to European markets. And today, DTEK continues to invest in development of the green energy. This May we have opened the first part of the Tel Aviv wind factory. It was built during the active phase of the warfare, just 100 kilometers away from the forward edge of the battle area. 19 wind turbines, 114 megawatts of installed capacity. Well, what does it mean? In the household language, in the consumer language, is the supply of the green, uninterrupted supply of the green energy to about 200,000 households of the Ukrainians. And now we've laid the fundamentals for installation of another 64 wind turbines, which would equal in total to 500 megawatts of installed capacity, and it's supposed to be the biggest wind power station not only in Ukraine but in the Eastern Europe. And we as DTEK, as a business, try to demonstrate our European partners and investors. We try to send the signal that we're here, we keep investing, we keep implementing our large-scale projects. And for us, this wind power station is a symbol of our pending victory. Thank you, Ms. Natalia. Let's proceed to the agricultural sector. We've heard that the territories that are mined in Ukraine equal 2 areas of Austria, including the agricultural lands. So how did this ecocide influence the business of your company? How does it influence the harvest and the business operation in general? Well, our company, I guess, is the company that reflects the whole of Ukraine in the smaller scale. Just like in Ukraine, 30% of the area is mined, 30% of our agricultural lands are mined as well. So we invested in construction of 14 river ports, operation of which is suspended for the time being after the ecocide in Kakhovka Dam. Some of our ports have become the beaches, the recreation beaches. They are currently hundreds of meters away from the waterways of Ukraine. Our company's mission and function is transportation of the crops from the farmers to the global markets to ensure the global food security. And we want to state that in Ukraine there is no land market for the time being. We work with more than 500,000 farmers, and the owner of the land has no funds for demining for the time being. The cost of demining is a couple of $1,000s per 1 hectare of land. Meanwhile, the cost of the land plot is up to $2,000. So it's cheaper to buy a land plot which is free of mines rather than demine them. And understanding this problem, we as a company started moving, and we've obtained a status of mine safety operator to support the farmership. It's a humanitarian mission for us. It's no business. We want to help the farmers grow their products. Those 7 million hectares of land that are currently mined are equal to 25 tons of the harvest that Ukraine is losing on an annual basis. So what we do to resume the operation? So we've obtained this status, and since April through May we were able to demine 1,500 hectares, but we don't stop there. We continue moving to expansion of our certificate for technical demining, and we are about to obtain a certificate for mechanized demining. Now mechanized demining means a very costly equipment, and without grant support this area is impossible to develop. So we're urging all the donors of Ukraine, we try to explain them that the farmer who has obtained the status of mine activity operator is the subject who is mostly interested in the most efficient and the most prompt demining possible, and the farmers who move in the direction of demining should be supported with that type of equipment to the maximum extent possible. And we as a company are ready to move along with the donors and to provide the services at their basic cost for the farmers. Thank you, Ms. Mykhailo. Mr. Oleksandr, Ms. Natalia has mentioned the green recovery and green power. It's on the agenda when we talk about the post-war recovery in Ukraine. It was #1 topic during London Recovery Conference. So why the green recovery should be a priority? Well, it should be a priority because Ukraine, as an EU candidate, should recover its economy in compliance with the EU standards. We continue working in that direction. The plans are being developed for recovery of our territories. We implement certain European standards. We've analyzed our legislation for its compliance with the European legislation. The ministry analyzed about 1,500 European directives and standards. And we've identified the priority legislative acts that should be prepared now for us to become the EU member. Ukraine works quite actively, so we become one family with the European Union. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Stanislav. Getting back to the research, how will it practically help the businesses and the state in general in the process of recovery and overcoming of the ecocide consequences? I think that the main work done by the ministry, by the partners, is the documenting of the damage and losses. And our task is, well, documenting is done by the ministry, by the legal things, something that can be produced in the course for compensation. And our task is to draw the attention of the society in the West, so that they understand it too. If their governments make certain steps to overcome those consequences, so that they understand why is it done, what is it done for. And another thing is for the politicians who are responsible of making decisions, so that they have not a tool but at least understanding of the scale of the damage on the environment that was inflicted upon Ukraine by the aggressor. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Do we have any questions on the floor? Just a second. A microphone, please. Thank you very much. I would like to ask you about such an aspect. This war going on today means large-scale fires, everyday fires all across Ukraine. Is it being taken into account? Let me answer you specifically about the fires. The figure is such that daily about 37,000 projectiles explode in Ukraine. Every projectile is a potential fire, both launched by the aggressor and our defenders. And respectively, if we calculate it from the very beginning, it's such an incredible number of potential fires that it's almost incalculable. Equalizing it, translating it into normal numbers, it's about 20-30 explosions per minute. So during our press conference, there were already like 200 to 300 explosions. We have a partner, a slide by Gazeta Wyborcza, published a map of fires. This is the map of fires. So those fires that erupt upon the explosion of the projectiles or due to the shellings, they've taken the information from NASA. NASA makes a photos of our territory on a daily basis, and I recommend you to pay attention to this map that was put together by Gazeta Wyborcza. So again, there are two effects of the fires. First, it's the ecocide, is the perishing of flora and fauna, and another effect is the emissions into the atmosphere. They are calculated too. We don't only calculate the damage inflicted upon the natural reserves, but also to the water and to the air. There are techniques developed for calculation of such damage and losses, so those are the two aspects that are taken into account while calculating the damage on the environment. Any more questions? Valentin Marchuk, Ukrinform. I have a question during. So there was a task to calculate the losses for the produced by the ecocide, but are there recommendations provided by the international partners in this regard, and do you work in this direction? So yes, there are international prosecutors who support us in documenting of the crimes committed by Russian Federation, and on top of that, as I mentioned, we as the Ministry of Environment have developed the techniques for documenting the damage and losses inflicted upon the environment. So there were legislative acts developed by the Ukrainian side, and state inspection works using those documents. So talking about our cooperation with international partners, during the conference in Egypt, which was attended by President Zelensky and Minister Strelets, we achieved agreement with our colleagues about work in this area, and many of our partners committed to helping us in development of the legislation which would be in compliance with the European legislation. So as to the bringing of the aggressor to liability for the loss and damage inflicted upon the environment, this work is underway not only in Ukraine but also in cooperation with our international partners. Well, I have another question regarding the energy sector. Have you already put together the preliminary calculation? What was the total damage inflicted upon the energy sector since the beginning of the full-scale invasion? And what were the calculations by DTEK? Maybe you have calculated the losses inflicted upon the energy infrastructure of DTEK. I mean, those produced by the Russian shellings and missile strikes. Yes, we really have such calculations. First of all, we want to thank the Ministry of Environment because all those metrics were developed in quite a prompt manner. I mean, those which are used for calculation of the losses, not only those resulting from the emissions into the air, but also which are related to the works, on the repair works and resumption of operation, on the damage of the land and property. So we have such calculations underway. Two of our businesses were impacted very seriously. Our generating capacities, I mean those affected by the shellings and missile strikes, and transportation capabilities. I cannot give you the exact numbers because they are currently being documented. The information is being processed now, but I think the time will come when we are able to share this information. So for what I understand, I've answered your question. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I have another question to you. You said that it's important to develop the green energy in Ukraine. So what is its status and condition now? We clearly understand that it was located mostly where the active warfare is going on now. So what should Ukraine do to stimulate the development of green energy, in your opinion? Thank you. Well, we have 4 facilities. The wind energy stations, they are in the temporarily occupied territories, but our response was the construction of the new generation capacities in Mykhailo region. So what's necessary for the development of the green energy today is the maximum popularization in the investment crowds of the attractiveness of Ukraine. So another question, you said that you plan to install 64 more wind turbines. So what is the period within which you will be able to install these 64 panels? So look, this 64 panels is 364 megawatts. Given the conditions of war, I cannot predict the exact period, but realistically, when there is no any external challenges or something that restricts our capabilities, it's about to take us a year or two, a year and a half or two. Earlier there were statements when there were active challenges of our infrastructure that green energy does not help, but rather becomes an obstacle because the weather is not stable and it does not allow to maintain certain balance in the energy system, in the power grid. So what is your comment on this situation? Well, my function is a little bit different. It's more of environmental nature, so I cannot really comment how the systems are being balanced and equalized under certain conditions. Well, I have another question about the 37,000 projectiles. You've mentioned that 37,000 projectiles explode on a daily basis. What do you mean by this number? This figure, it's a number of the shellings in the front lines, shellings of the infrastructure beyond the front lines, and it includes also some household fires. Well, I'm talking about the fires reflected in the map, but it's a very small fraction. So 37,000 projectiles is the figure. I cannot tell you where it's taken from, but on every side we have a footnote which shows the source of data where this figure is originating from. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any more questions on the floor? Well, I want to get back to mining a little bit. I was in Croatia, in Vukovar, 5 years after the end of the Serbian-Croatian war. So upon 5 years, all the city was filled with the demining specialists. You couldn't walk everywhere. So it was 5 years after that. So how many years do we need to demine Ukraine? Do we have any preliminary estimates? The engineers say at least 30 years, those who analyzed it, but I would rather segregate the complete demining and technological demining of, say, manufacturing capacities or agricultural lands. So the technical demining of agricultural lands is happening way quicker than the demining of forests, for example. You know, those forest lines that protect the fields against the winds. So the full clearing may probably take more than 30 years. I can give you an example that even the Pivdennny River that flows in Mykhailo region and where the Mykhailo port is, even before the war, the World War II mines were still found there after almost 80 years. So demining is quite a lengthy process. How can it be expedited? Again, the agrarians should move into the direction of creation of mine operators. They should hire sappers, engineers, they should train, and the donors, on the other hand, should assist those agrarians who have such certificates or certificated departments of the mine activity operators to support them, because agrarians are those who are interested in the soonest possible demining of the land. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stanislav. You had another remark. Yes, I want to say generally about this study. We were going to issue it to summarize the 5 days of the active phase of the warfare. The war goes on, so this research is not finalized yet. We will update it after a certain period. So once again, I want to thank the partners who supported it: NIBULON, DTEK, Adama, Ukraine, and the Ministry of Environmental Protection, because they were our analytic partner. They've provided a lot of data. I also want to thank our media partners, Gazeta Wyborcza, Mind.ua, who supported us, and I want to invite everybody, if you have a need to communicate or you can help us communicate those messages, please partner with us, become our business media partners, and let's communicate this information together to the European and Western stakeholders. And I want to thank everybody for your questions. Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope this research will be of use in recovery of Ukraine, and Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum will continue its operation today. Tomorrow. Stay tuned.